Hey, what is up everybody? My name is Dea. Welcome back to dmpaints. In this video, we're gonna be looking at days 6 and 7 of Inktober. So we're definitely continuing the challenge, except this time it is gonna be digital. So I'm gonna be taking you through my entire process of how I created the combined word prompts, the kind of artwork that came of it, what different kinds of brushes that I use in ProCreate, and just my whole thought process behind it. So I'd just love to watch this time lapse for the very first time with you. Let's get started. Okay, so initially when I thought of the word prompt fan, I thought of like a fan blowing air at somebody. I don't know, but then I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like a fan that people use. And then so I thought of geishas. And then I was like, okay, this is so cool. I can make like a royalty piece and something like that. You see like the little note there, it says cherry blossom, because I knew I wanted to add some sort of flowers because I always kind of love adding that to my pieces. Initially, I was having a lot of trouble with the face structure. So what I decided to do was actually to go in to look at some references on Pinterest. Unfortunately, they're not included in here because I was actually looking at so many all together. And I kind of just started compiling this face and getting an idea of the structure that the woman would have, and I just wanted to really nail the features and things like that. So Pinterest is definitely your best friend for this. Okay, let's continue here. So I initially wanted to do like a kimono sort of thing. I definitely ended up changing this a little bit later on, and what I really wanted to do was incorporate the dragon. So this dragon, I'm gonna link down the artist in the description below. Thank you so much for this reference, because I have just learned to draw so many things throughout Inktober that I've never drawn before, like birds and dragons, so that's super cool. And initially what I wanted to do was have the dragon like holding the fan in his mouth. This is partially because I have to practice drawing hands, so I mean, like, get creative with your skills and how you put them together to, you know, to really make your piece, what's this? In terms of the fan, I wanted to make it translucent, and that was to show still her features. I wanted to see her bright red lips in the portrait. That was really important to me. And I really wanted to emphasize red in this drawing, just for like the traditional like Japanese kind of art. Like, I really wanted to have the red in the background and be kind of central to the piece. And I'm gonna talk a little bit now about the brushes that I'm using. In a lot of my digital pieces, what I find gets me really nice blends, but also kind of like a textured sort of thing, is wet acrylic. So honestly, like, I would like to say 90% of the brushes I use are definitely the ones that come in ProCreate. And a good thing to know is that you can actually download a lot of free brushes as well. A lot of free brush packs online that people create. But yeah, I use wet acrylic. That one's free. I love it a little bit more than normal acrylic. I just find that it blends better. Again, it's got some sort of glaze to it because it's wet acrylic. And I also tend to flip back and forth between wet acrylic and then oil paint. It really just depends on the painting and the kind of texture that I am trying to add. Another thing that I was really trying to nail here was getting her face super white, and I had a challenge with creating the contours while knowing that the geisha's traditional makeup is literally like white. So I was just like, oh my god, how do I do contours and have just like a completely white face? So for me, the shadows were very, very subtle. I think I could have done a little bit better of a job in terms of the contouring. Still learning that. And the final thing that I wanted to add to this was the traditional cherry blossoms. Again, just looked up a ton of references on Pinterest. Always, you know, like, if you're not familiar with something, you're not comfortable with like the structure, it's always so good to have references. It doesn't matter even if you think you're comfortable, like, it's always good to look at the real thing, because sometimes you can just forget how far off you are. And then once you're so deep into your shading and your coloring and everything, and then your structure's off, it's like, you just got to go back and correct so much. So always recommend having a reference. I was adding a bit of texture to the dragon here. I believe that the brushes that I was using for the majority of the time to add just like these little hair details and like the outlines for the drag and things like that, I use ink bleed a lot. So I believe that is in the inking section. So I'm gonna be adding in all the brushes that I tend to use, and especially for this one, I used ink bleed for the scales. So yeah, I used ink bleed for the scales. And that was definitely to get some texture on there. And then what I did after I added these scales is I went ahead and on a layer underneath in ProCreate, just because you kind of want to keep your layers separated if possible, I added in different colors to kind of make the scales pop and just show that there was this depth to the dragon. Because if you just have these scales and you're not showing this change in light, you're not really achieving or indicating that there's depth in your piece. So I would definitely keep that in mind. Again, I'm not like an expert, you know, contourer or whatever, but I'm learning so much this year, so much along the way, especially a lot about color and light, and proportions as well, The fan, by the way, there are color settings that you can use on ProCreate. I believe that the fan I used, oh my gosh, I have my iPad right here, I can tell you guys. It's a hard light fan. Okay, so the way that the light settings work is that they take into mind whatever's in the background and they'll adjust. So hard light was in relation to the things that are in the background, so her face and then like the red from the circle and all that. And I love the way that turned out. I love playing around with the light settings in ProCreate. You can get some really, really cool effects. Like it already looks so translucent to me, but then vibrant. I always emphasize like the importance of just like vibrant colors in my artworks. That's one thing I always look to do. And then the last thing I added in is I went with the wet acrylic brush and I started creating cracks in her head, almost as if she was made of porcelain. And then I went in a little bit deeper with ink bleeds to get in those like final cracks in her head to make it look like there was some sort of depth. And then the very last thing that I did at the end was add rusted decay. So this is in industrial. This is an industrial, and it gave that kind of crackly textured look to her face also to indicate that it's like kind of like old, dried out, porcelain, rustic looking, you know. I also use this in my Divine piece, so you can kind of compare these two pieces here, and I don't know, I love that effect the first time, so I really wanted to try this on her and give her more of like an ancient look, if that makes sense. And guys, that is the whole piece. So I really hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you understood and benefited from this ProCreate tutorial. If you have any other questions about ProCreate in general or just seeing more tutorials like this, please let me know. I'd really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I will see you back on Monday. Bye.